So good afternoon, everybody. As you can see, this is a seminar based around the idea of continuing our vision through the whole chain. Just one question for you. How many cinematographers out there at the moment sitting? How many? Oh, no wonder I can't get any work. Too many of us. So how many care about what their images look like on the TVs and cinema screens? I'm sure everybody says that. Okay. So a couple of years ago, I sat through a film I'd photographed in a cinema with a very high ambient light and fire exit signs spilling light onto the screen, and what seemed like a poorly calibrated projector on a silver screen with a very pronounced hotspot. Not much fun, as you can imagine, and certainly ruined one sequence in particular by revealing shadow detail that had been carefully set at the grade as, can I see something or not? An important aspect of the director's creative vision and intention, and mine. Subsequently, at the next BSC board meeting, it was decided we should address this delivery of images, or as the title of the panel suggests, retaining the vision side of our film and television industries. So we have been reaching out to others involved in this, and have today very honoured to welcome Dave Monk, who is the CEO of the European Digital Cinema Forum. Dave has 50 years experience in all things digital projectors, and like us, he cares passionately about this. We're also very pleased to welcome here renowned film editor, producer, and board member of Directors UK, Iain Softley. For cinematographers, the director is really the most important person we work with. And I see this event as a continuation of our collaboration in helping them bring their films from scripts to screens in a manner which we can be sure they will be seen as they were intended and indeed signed off in the grading suite. Next to, I've muddled up here. So we have, where's Paul gone? I lost you, Paul. I'll come to you. We have Greg Fisher in the stripy jersey there, who I think of as my caveman. As in creator of absorbing images on the back wall of modern-day Plato's caves, probably better known as grading suites. Greg was colorist on the movie I referred to and was sitting next to me at that screening. And I think he, yes, nodding his head there. Next to Greg, we welcome Paul Collard, our BSc friend, who also has some 50 years experience in top-end laboratory and post-production to his name. In fact, he and I have known each other and often worked together on and off for most of that time. Further down the line, we have a very special guest. We welcome here Mike Bradbury, who is the Chief Technical Manager of the Odeon cinema chain, and very much at the heart of the debate of the direction of his side of the film industry is going to take. Myself and fellow BSc Governor John Daly have been to several demos and discussions around the subject of ambient spill light, etc., and have been looking at the latest laser projectors and discussing pros and cons of different technologies and screens. Mike is a serious cinephile and fully understands where we come from. Mike is also seriously passionate about bringing filmmakers' work to the screens looking and sounding as we, the filmmakers, intended. We are very fortunate and honoured to be working with someone at his level in the film industry. And finally, we have another Mike, Mike Eley, equally renowned cinematographer, BSc and fellow governor, who has been involved in this project from the start. I must stress that it's not all bad news out there, but as we will hear, there are enough areas of development and concern to make it important that we work together and address the whole chain from acquisition to delivery. So that So that is why we have gathered the whole chain from acquisition of the image through post-production to final display here today. One of the comments I've heard quite a few times over the last year or so has passed down from the cinema management, who seem to say that since they are not getting any complaints from the public, all must be well. I acknowledge that I am consciously aware of the issues I referred to when at a screening, and certainly notice and enjoy it when at a screening facility all the auditorium lights are, and including the fire exit lights, are turned out. And I'm certainly of the opinion that even if we don't consciously notice these distractions, it will unconsciously affect our enjoyment of the movie. And that is the rub for cinemas, particularly going forward, as they increasingly face competition from the ever-improving TV experience delivered to the comfort of our homes. So enough from me. Dave is going to run the panel from here. So Dave, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Nick. So next slide, is that away? Here we go. So it's David Monk from the EDCF. Who on earth are the EDCF? The European Digital Cinema Forum. This was a group that was founded, started up in the year 2000 and was formalised in 2003. And for those of you that know your D-cinema history, that's pretty much at the start of the rollout of cinema. My involvement started some 13 years before at Texas Instruments, where we developed some technology to create big screens that was very different to what was available in the market at that time. And one of the exciting things was when we first showed that technology to people in the movie industry, they said, yeah, there's a lot of potential here. What we need to do in the long term is find a replacement for film, but film is a pretty damn good standard. You're going to have to do a lot of running if you're really going to replace that technology. So I was involved with that from the very beginning. And by way of introduction, a little bit of myself, one of the things that we found during all that development work, and most of that work was guided by cinematographers, we found that certain things that suggested ought to look one way didn't always look like that. It was very much a function of how images are received by the human visual system. It turns out that, I was married to an optometrist and started reading a lot of my wife's books. And I found that there was a heck of a lot to be learned about, not about what makes an image, but what gets the image into our perception system, because vision is it's a type of perception, and it's not just the way some of us think about it. So I might bob up and sort of say, but it's what you can see that really counts. It's not just the pixel on the screen, it's how we end up perceiving that. I know a lot of cinematographers understand that very well, in the same way that a lot of artists understand that. Because if you don't realize how an image impacts on the person, you're not really doing your job really very well. So that's a little bit my background. The European Digital Cinema Forum was started out of, I suppose in some senses, out of a sense of fear. Hey, the whole world's going to turn over to digital. How is that going to affect studios, distributors, exhibitors, manufacturers? A lot of concern back in the early 2000 time, and the DTI, the BKSTS, the Swedish Film Institute, the French organizations, the CNC and the CST, got together and said we need to form a body where we can pool perhaps our ignorance, but get our knowledge together so we can keep an eye on this and find a place where we can better understand that. And it ended up that we had people in our group that were from all those lists you can see down there. Pretty much everybody in the industry is represented in EDCF. Now it's about 40 companies in about 12 different countries, and we're constantly getting new members. A few years ago, this group asked itself, well, digital's done now, isn't it? Aren't we? It's all over. It's game over. Job's done. You don't need an EDCF anymore. except that the list of stuff that's coming was probably 3 times longer than the one we had in the year 2000. So we're still trucking along with that. It's an organisation that a lot of people come to talk about cinema technology, and I guess our orientation and our expertise is largely in the domain of projection, delivering the image, and that will be the sort of skew on this session today, which I hope you'll find very interesting. So, big topic, Nick said, big topic, retaining the vision. Wow, that's a hell of a big topic. Where do you start and finish with retaining the vision? Whose vision is it anyway? Is it the cinematographer's vision, the director's vision, the producer's vision? And pretty much anybody who gets involved with the movie thinks it's their vision to some degree or other. The issues of how you protect that through post, how you end up delivering it to theatres, and then, of course, the person that can mess the whole thing up is the exhibitor if it's not shown properly in the right environment. We're going to be spending quite a bit of time talking about that, and what a joy it is to have representatives from all segments of the industry to help us think that through. We're going to spend, hopefully, about an hour talking and then half an hour in debate with you guys. So it's going to be a lively, open session. And a lot of this is talking about the challenges of we need new things to expand our horizons, but we need standards to keep it under control. And that's quite a debate. So there we are. Next topic, whose vision is it? We are very grateful to have Iain Softley from the Distributors UK to just give us a couple of words about, he's going to do it from the lectern. This is going to be an informal session, thinking about whose vision is it and what are his thoughts. So Iain?
You want me to go there?
No, you can do it there, that's fine.
I'm the Iain Softley, I'm the chair of Directors UK Film Committee. So my focus is really film and cinema. And Directors UK are passionate about cinema. And cinema to us, as to everybody else, means the telling of stories to a group of people, often strangers, who gather together in a large darkened room to experience that alchemical mixture of sound and image projected on a large screen. Now, the celebrated film editor Walter Murch wrote an article in the New York Times at the dawn of the introduction of digital in cinemas, saying that since man began, he's been telling stories in darkened spaces around a source of light, and that's not going to change. So to us, that is, if you like, something that is important to maintain every stage of that experience. So it doesn't just end at the means by which you gather the information, visual, sound, and the storytelling. It's also the environment where people experience it. I was told off the record by somebody who's very senior in the exhibition world that, as I think we know, that particularly independent cinema and mainstream cinema as well has made huge advances in the comfort, in the experience on offer. But in some cinemas, there's a danger that sort of attention to details stops as soon as the audience goes into the actual room. If you look on the internet and you look at reviews for even some of the major cinemas in London, there are often complaints from the audience about lights being left on, and I've experienced this myself. Maybe, I actually experienced a situation in the past where a film was run for 5 minutes. It can only have been that the lens wasn't in the projector. So at every stage of the process, we need to have people who are as passionate as everybody is here about cinema to make sure that the vision that was intended by the filmmakers is being delivered. It might not be that there's a projectionist there, but there certainly needs to be somebody who is checking the circumstances in which the film is being exhibited. In fact, Directors UK are starting conversations with everybody in the industry about potentially some sort of kite mark, where the luminance of the projector, the quality of the screen can be checked to make sure that, and it's something that we've actually had quite a lot of enthusiastic support from exhibitors, To be able to say, okay, yes, we want to distinguish the experience of going to the cinema as different from what you can see in your home. Just answering your question about whose vision is it? Well, I think the best description of how directors see themselves is we see ourselves as the conductor of the orchestra. Maybe the composer is the writer, and the orchestra members are all the other creative collaborators, of which, particularly in my experience, cinematographers are ones whose input and collaboration I value extremely highly. And at the point that I've selected a cinematographer, really then it becomes our vision from a visual point of view. And I think the most important person, the most important group of people that benefits from a consistency through the whole chain of delivering the filmmaker's vision is the audience. Now, in all sorts of ways that the audience might not appreciate, their experience of the work is altered by all sorts of very, very subtle changes in sound and light and environment and the size of the set and the color palette. And I think that we're shortchanging our audience if we don't make sure that that is safeguarded through the whole process. I mean, one of the side effects of the sort of digital revolution, and Directors UK have been, as you probably know, very vocal in trying to maintain that filmmakers have a choice as to whether they film on film or digital, not being anti-digital, but wanting to crush people that are maybe anti-film and anti-choice. But some of the byproducts of that is the technology has been used to dilute that kind of singularity of image. For example, on the set, there are many, many more monitors. When at the end of each day, the rushes or the dailies are sent to many, many more executives because technology allows that. There are many more edits that are allowed to be seen by many, many more people. So I think that it's important that everybody does everything they can to preserve the idea that the film as conceived by the filmmaker is delivered to the audience in as pure and as consistent a way possible.
It's awfully tempting not to get going on the Q&A straight away when some of those, there's lots of interesting topics there, but we're going to come back to them. Please try and hold up your questions through most of this until we've got through our little preambles, and then we're going to look forward to hearing what you think about some of those things. Next up, as nicely set up in terms of the analogy that Ian used before was first violin in terms of you got a conductor, but the man who's pretty pivotal to the whole thing is a cinematographer. So what better way of introducing Mike Eley, very established cinematographer, governor of the BSC. What's your take on all this, Mike?
Thanks, David. Well, you were saying that this panel is sort of skewed towards the presentation end. I guess I'm here to sort of bring it right back to the point of capture. And I just wanted to talk briefly about a few of the issues surrounding the role of the cinematographer and my perspective on HDR and other digi innovations. I'm currently grading a feature working with a fantastic colorist who knows more about color gamuts, RGB gammas, and custom curves than I ever will do. He grades the picture from shot to shot, maintaining continuity across the scenes, as well as introducing keys, windows, and shapes to help me achieve, and the director, the look that we want the film to, the vision we had, either the one we had in prep or on the set, or we had, about 5 minutes ago, because the vision changes. And it's an example, if any were needed, that, as Ian said, we need our collaborators and our team to achieve the look of the film, which will hopefully go on to be the one that the public see in years to come. And anyone who's worked on a film knows the kind of detail that goes into the prep, checking the sort of prepping the look that is going to be the film, hopefully the film. I mean, it can be often be a vague and discursive, sort of meandering sort of conversation that will change, but it's an essential sort of distillation of the views of the director, the cinematographer, the production designer, and the director to have something to take onto set, to be something that anchors the vision of the film. So by the time you get onto the set, all you've got to deal with is the weather, logistics, props, and actors. Our direct involvement in the film is up to and including the DI, film outs, video grades, and pan and scans, and before the film is finally delivered. Beyond that point, we have to just hope and pray that the spec holds up so the public does see what you wanted to see. HDR is, I guess, the newest spec on the scene. Hugely impressive. If you haven't seen it, do. It gives a whole another layer of wow to the cinema-going experience. And we, the cinematographers, will have to learn, I think, how to see HDR in much the same way that we learned over the years to see and intuit 500 ASA Kodak film. And in turn, how we've come to see the Alexa, although it still surprises me all the time. And we will have to do the same with the HDR, but it's another tool, and it should be regarded that way. The scope to stretch the image from toe to shoulder is extensive, far more than we've previously known, and that opens up opportunities to create images which, for instance, with deep blacks, unlike we've seen before. But it also creates the possibility for things to get unbalanced. I say that because today we're in a situation where the DP can sometimes struggle to get themselves involved in the post-production part of film production, and they struggle to even get to get involved in the DI, and given that the sort of digital realm presents this impression, I would say, that the technology is open to all and accessible, there's even a greater sort of risk that what we set out to do on location can be easily altered, and we need to. I think that part of it needs to be sort of policed even quite more sort of rigorously. I think that's our task. With broadcasters sending down edicts about what K we should be shooting at, which then in turn influences what camera we shoot, and then possibly even what lens we shoot. I think the idea of freedom of choice is becoming ever more sort of threatened. So that's my statement. I mean, control, predictable outcomes, standards, knowing that the vision set is the one that the public will see, not just this year, but for years to come.
Mike. Mike very cunningly started talking about colour temperature as a subtle introduction to Greg Fisher, extremely accomplished colourist. Does colourist always have a U in this country?
Does it have what, sorry?
Does a U in it? Or is it always the American spelling of colourist?
Well, I often request that if I have a credit, it has a U in it, yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
I don't always get that.
So Greg, the last thing these people want is for you to start messing things up with your tool set. So
Yeah.
Can you give us your spin on this, please?
Yeah, I mean, I see my role as an intermediary between the film reaching the outside world in whatever flavour people will be seeing it in, and the filmmakers. So, my initial focus is to engage with the filmmakers about what they're trying to achieve. some jobs I'd be involved during testing and supervising dailies, or even going on set to see what's being seen on the video monitors on set. Other jobs, it will literally arrive, you'll do the final grade, and there'll be no other involvement at all. But
cinematographers always want to be part of the grade, to be involved with that process. Is there a reciprocal thing where colorists really want to see what's coming off, going onto camera in the first place?
I mean, personally, I find it very helpful and interesting, and the earlier I can engage with the DOP and the director about what they're trying to achieve in the photography, the better I can carry it through the post-production process.
Right.
And we can work out. I mean, there's two sort of aspects to my job. There's a technical aspect and a creative aspect. But how the film will pass through post-production, from my perspective, should always come from the filmmakers and what that particular film is and what its requirements are. So rather than sort of how it used to be, that every film would go through the same process at the end, and somehow you would have to squeeze all these different types of films shot in different ways through the same process. It's to engage and try and navigate a way through, the best way through for that film and those filmmakers. So some filmmakers will want a very simple setup on set, colour-wise. Others might want grading on set. Similar situation with the dailies. Some filmmakers might want quite a lot of grading to happen during the dailies, because I'm sure everyone here is aware of how attached people get to whatever the dailies look like, even if they look terrible. People get very, very attached to it, because they spend a year looking at those images and believing that they're doing useful work with them. So I'm trying to help the cinematographer retain their vision and it not get muddied along the way by trying to sort of troubleshoot those kind of problems. So, then, I'm also looking at, each film will have a different set of deliverables, so that may also have an influence on how we set up, how the job will go through post-production technically. It might be 2D and 3D, it might have HDR deliverables or film prints, and we just need to understand all those things to build a framework, get all of that set up so it's nice and solid, and then everybody feels comfortable to do the creative work that is what we're all there to actually do, really. But you can't really get into that until those technical aspects are taken care of. I think the different displays that we have to work for is an ongoing issue, because when we do a grade, if there's a 3D version, there might be different luminances of 3D. We'll also have to make a video deliverable. Increasingly, we'll have HDR deliverables, and each one of those will perceive differently. So even though the maths of how to transform from one to the other will get you a good way towards the end result, how successful that translation is very much dependent upon what the images are. So you may find, if you have a sort of pastel-y, low contrast film, when you try and transfer that grade to 3D at 3.5 foot Lamberts, it all gets a bit lost. And if you go from standard dynamic range to HDR, you may find that suddenly all the specular highlights are drawing your eye away from what, during the grading process, you were trying to draw the eye towards. So you may have to sort of rebalance each image based on what you're perceiving through whatever display you're looking at. So, that's sort of how I see my job, to try and represent the filmmakers.
You're touching on lots of things that I think we all want to sort of ask you more questions about. But in the spirit of keeping the presentation stuff compact, I'm going to step on, and it's me again, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the projection end of things and see if I can put that in a perspective. In the context of the projection system, I tried to deliver what I tried to explain in this first bullet what the goal is. To deliver the movie to every patron as it was mastered. Exhibition accepts that when they get their DCP or their SMPTE DCP, we'll talk about those things in a bit, that from that moment on, their responsibility is to deliver it with absolute faithfulness. And that means in every screen, in every country, to every seat in every place. And that's a big ask. And what that consistency is all about, it's many things. It's brightness, color, contrast, sharpness, motions, maybe it's stereoscopic depth, it's without ghosts, it's with stability. We don't want projectors bouncing around. It's the full frame that was intended to be displayed, and that's another thing that we're going to pick up on, and completely free of artifacts, whether they're motion artifacts or modulation artifacts. And I think here's my little kind of hotspot thing here about, I think the point is as perceived by patrons with excellent vision from all seat positions. It's very easy to start looking at the screen from 3 inches away to see what the bugs are. The key thing is, can everybody here in the room that's looking at this screen, do they get what was intended? It's silly worrying about, high spatial resolution that the human visual system hasn't got a hope of seeing at a normal viewing distance. And there's many other aspects that we have to start thinking about, because there's a whole raft of stuff coming down the pipe now that is possible but not necessarily useful. Now, when we talk about the projection system, it's not just, we tend to think about it's the projector, or maybe it's the projector and the server. It's actually the whole shooting match. It's things like the port glass, which can mess up the contrast if there's internal reflections in the glass. It's about the optical adapters that we put in front of lenses, the type of screen, massive issues we've got now, and Mike's going to talk to us about some of those problems, real serious artifacts that relate to just the screen technology itself. Of course, in 3D, there's many other things like the eyewear and that whole viewing experience. But now a new set of things which we haven't bothered much about up until now is the auditorium itself. Now, come here to a BSC event and you don't have loads of light bleeding all over the place. This is pretty, there's a lot of cinemas I've been to that would be proud to have blackouts as good as this temporary rig out we got here. Sensible blue lighting, properly designed auditorium. Now, that's becoming a big issue with high dynamic range, because we can have the most fabulous acquisition, the most brilliant projector, and then if we've got exit lights that are bleeding all over the screen, you completely wasted a boatload of money. So all of these things impact on image quality, and we got to start thinking about those things. Now, when you think about preserving the image, it's about a consistency. Now, one of the things that I think really did happen is there was a view back in the 90s that film was a pretty standard experience. In practice, it wasn't standard at all, but people did feel like when you put in a projector, it was pretty much going to show the same everywhere. We all know that's not quite true. There was quite a lot of variations of standard 35mm film, but for the most part, people knew that if you made your prints, you put them in a projector, you knew pretty much how they were going to look. Of course, when what they looked like on day one was a lot different to what they looked like 3 or 4 weeks later after they'd been mangled through the projector. But for the most part, it was a fairly standard system. And that was the challenge of the digital cinema technology, to deliver that kind of consistency. As it turned out, the kind of big sort of unexpected surprise with digital was that digital could deliver a much higher degree of consistency than was ever possible with film, because there was no wear out of the fundamental media itself. And you know, the work that was done in those years by essentially cinematographers and studios did create a standard that has worked really well for us. Now, what else contributes to consistency? Well, how you set the thing up in the first place makes a big difference. And as I said, the decor, the reflectivity, the sort of lighting you've got, all are really important. Similarly, calibration. Now, for the first time when we put digital projectors in, we were actually able to calibrate the colors so that we knew when you put primary green up or primary red, that we knew what the color coordinates were, and we could set them accordingly. So that was a giant step forward for consistency. But the other thing that now, 10 years on, we've got a lot of old projectors around, and maintenance of those projectors is also a major source of inconsistency. So standards were developed. Digital started off really as a cost avoidance thing, because film was getting so expensive. At an average price of $1,000 a print, and some releases doing 10,000 prints, that was a lot of cost, which much better if you could just rewrite hard disks, which was a lot of the driving force behind digital cinema. But we were able to achieve what we'd call an answer print quality pretty much to every screen. So that was a big plus for that initiative. So you probably all know about the D-Cinema specification. It's a big long list to really reinforce that there was a lot of great work done in setting the standard up for D-Cinema. The DCI spec and the DCP all had this stuff in it. We had standard resolution, standard primaries, and not going to go through all those things. And that served us well for the first 10 or 15 years of D-Cinema's life. But you can tell there's a but coming, can't you? Things begin to slip. This is not things beginning to slip on this first bullet. The DCI spec was not really, it was more of a specification of requirements rather than a properly developed standard. So DCI handed that off to SMPTE, and it's taken about 10 years to formalize everything because it needs a lot of cross-industry agreement. That's very much completed for what we had in the first place. And now cinemas are having to make that conversion. But over that time, new stuff happened. 3D came along. Now, we've had people who argued the toss about the 0.5% of colorimetry errors and being extremely nitpicky about the extent of brightness uniformity across screens. 3D comes along, and 3D makes a lot of money. 3D is very exciting to people. All of a sudden, we pop it into a 48 frame per second placeholder, and now we're ready to put in silver screens, which have got horrible problems in some cases, much higher gain screens. Why do we put gain screens in? Well, the 3D modulators took away all the light, and so we had to put gain screens back in to get the luminance level up. But still, many people go to a 3D show and they say, oh, I don't really like 3D. What they really don't like is watching a movie at 2 or 3 foot Lamberts when the SMPTE spec is 14. So, these were kind of people letting go of the standard in order to capitalize on a commercial opportunity. And the glasses were wrecking the contrast, they were wrecking the colorimetry, but we kind of put up with that because, well, 3D is a big deal. Avatar's made a bomb, $2.9 billion of box office. Why would anyone want to stand in the way of that? It's great stuff, very exciting. Similarly, Peter Jackson's Hobbit, he wanted to shoot it at 48 frames per second. Again, a lot of that standard hadn't really been set, and there was a lot of challenges getting that operational everywhere. Warner Brothers spent a lot of time sorting that out, but it wasn't necessarily received with the greatest excitement that I think everybody would have liked. So there's been evolutions going on, but now there's a whole new generation of kit coming down. The biggest one is laser projection. I pretty much got the impression just a few months ago that most of the projector companies that are making new models, most of them are all going to be laser projectors within the next year or two. Let's face it, most of the world has already got a projector. They've got a Xenon or a UHP type projector. So the market is not quite what it was. And the projector companies are now looking, well, how am I going to, what is the replacement technology going to be? Well, lasers offer the big plus of can really put more brightness in. And when you can put more brightness in a projector, you have the scope to increase the dynamic range. When you put more brightness in, you can do 3D properly. A lot of reasons, and not only that, a laser projector arguably can be a lot more efficient. So less electricity, you don't have to keep changing the bulb and risking people's, changing a xenon light bulb can be a hazardous thing in its own right. You don't have to keep doing all that stuff, lasts for 30 or 50,000 hours, but there are a number of issues, and you're going to hear a little bit about some of those from Mike, one of which is speckle. Speckle is that sparkly effect that a laser projector gives, and a lot of things going on to mitigate that. I think in the not too distant future that will go away, but right now it's a tough problem for lasers, as is the color consistency, because we grade our movies for the mainstream, which are xenon-based projectors, and although the primaries are the same, the look is different. We can talk about that as time goes on. We've got high dynamic range. Very exciting. I think, for my money, if you said of all the stuff coming down the road, what's really the most important? What do cinematographers care about? What do patrons think really makes a difference? I'd say HDR trumps everything else. That punch that comes with brighter whites and detailed blacks is what I think almost everybody wants. But right now, the only real established system is the Dolby Vision system. Pretty damn expensive system. It's beautiful. Many of you may be not seen it, but there's only one still, I think, projector in this country that's Dolby Vision, and that's in the Dolby place at Soho Square. But it is very impressive technology. But yet we haven't really defined what is peak white, what's the dynamic range, what's the bit depth. Those things are still in discussion, and I think the TV industry is getting on with that a lot faster than the movie industry is. High frame rate, there's another new capability. We can now run movies at 30, 48, 60, maybe even 120 frames per second. Do people want that? You probably all read about Ang Lee's work with Billy Lynn's Halftime Walk, shot at 120 frames per second per eye in 3D, 4K, HDR, but it was only delivered at 24p because the technology wasn't installed yet. And then we're all watching what James Cameron's going to do with high frame rate or variable frame rate. Question I've got for you, and maybe for later, is what do you think about higher frame rate photography, and how important is that new capability? With lasers, we can do more colors. That's interesting. The big question with that is, does anybody care? Does it deliver value? Because it's quite expensive to deliver. We've got new systems that can put 3 DCI projectors in one auditorium to give you a 270-degree experience. It beggars belief that people would pay money to do that, but people say it's pretty impressive. Barco Escape and ScreenX have got quite a few installations. We've got all the things going on with shaking the seats around with back scratchers and back ticklers and smoke and spray and smell and everything else. But all of these things that we're speaking about here, none of them have got really established standards. So this is creating a nightmare for people that are trying to, what are the deliverables? How many do you do? So why hasn't DCI done 2.0? It did 1.0 and 1.1 and 1.2. The problem with the DCI spec was that it was closely associated with a program to fund the conversion to digital. DCI 2.0 sounds like generation 2, and there's a great deal of concern that if you start making the DCI 2, all the exhibitors are going to say, well, okay, we need VPF 2.0 as well. And that's certainly not going to happen from what I can see. But I think if we don't go back to thinking through what standards we want, how bright HDR has to be, what frame rates we're going to build our projectors to show, what kind of contrast level we need in the auditorium to be able to show things, we're just running open loop. Now you could say, well, why don't we just sit still a bit and make what we've got work better? And lots of exhibitors are saying exactly that. Let's just get it right in every theatre, in every screen, because there's plenty of opportunity to do that. But meanwhile, the TV industry isn't standing still. Bigger screens, they're all HDR, they're all 4K, they're all high frame rate, got bigger colour spaces. I think the movie industry's got to be careful. It can't just sit still while those things are happening, because there'll be a view that, well, it's a better experience at home. I don't have to listen to that guy eating popcorn next to me. I can enjoy the movie in my own lighting level with my own sound system, and that's going to be competitive if we're not careful. So where does all this lead us to? What does it mean for post-production? And I think Greg's going to have a lot more work dealing with all the colour spaces, the different sorts of contrast technology, what sort of monitors he's going to be using, and the deliverables. Paul's going to talk for a minute about how this impacts on what kind of deliverables the distributors are going to have to supply. And at the end of the day, which of these new things delivers punch? Where's the bang for the buck? Now, the sort of million-dollar question is, can you retain the vision by doing nothing, or do we need to innovate and define what those new standardized systems will be? That's the setup for the next speaker, I think if I go the right way, who is Paul Collard. He's not with Deluxe, but he spent nearly most of his life at Deluxe. He's an independent consultant at the moment, and there's not much about post-production that Paul doesn't know. So, Paul, what's your take on all this?
Well, thank you, David. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm going to talk about deliverables and the sharp end, which is in the post-production environment, how we go about delivering to all these multiple platforms. Now, alongside enhancements such as HDR, the range and diversity of delivery platforms continues to increase, and this is unlikely to change in the future. Success in maintaining the creative intent, delivering approved high-quality masters to multi-platforms, lies in producing bespoke files, optimized for each delivery platform and approved by the creative team, the director, the DOP, in a consort with the colorist, in calibrated viewing environments. One size fits all simply doesn't cut in this situation. In DI post-production, the concept of producing a high-end DCI-compliant cinema master graded for the standard screen brightness of 14-foot Lamberts, from which all other deliverables are derived, has long been the accepted workflow. But the advent of high dynamic range, wide colour gamut, Dolby Vision cinema masters, graded now for a screen brightness of up to 31-foot Lamberts, raises a new question. Does the Dolby Vision HDR graded master become the high-end master from which all deliverables, including the DCI standard version, flow, or is it a separate deliverable? My view for the present is it is sensible to treat both the HDR and DCI masters as both separately graded and delivered versions. And this avoids the technology solution, which is applying a trim pass to one to cascade down to the next. Each needs to be treated separately, graded and approved separately, and that way we retain the vision. In a recent development for HDR in the cinema, Eclair Colour and Cinema Next in France have exploited a larger dynamic range available in Sony projectors, up to 8,000 to 1, compared to the DCI standard DLP projector, which has a dynamic range of 2,000 to 1. To achieve a greater dynamic range and wider colour gamut from these existing projectors, redistributing the available bit depth across the extended range. Again, compatibility is the issue here, because it only works on Sony projectors. For comparison, Dolby Vision auditoriums can achieve a brightness range of up to and beyond 10,000 to 1. Turning for a moment to deliverables for cinema distribution, I'm going to speak a bit about the DCP. The original DCP format specified by DCI was known as the Interop DCP. Now, after much user experience and feedback, a new specification, the SMP to E DCP, was introduced with improved security and subtitle handling to replace Interop DCPs. But we're talking about a worldwide industry here, so change has to take place carefully and not to cause any difficulties in the distribution workflow. The EDCF, working closely with European distributors and exhibitors, and UNIC, the exhibitors organisation, has overseen test releases of films with SMPT DCPs to 100% of cinemas in Norway, Netherlands, now France, and soon the UK. This is the way to go in the future, because all new projectors and server equipment is based on the SMPT DCP. The present system introduced by DCI has served the industry very well for 10 years, as Dave has already said, providing a firm foundation for reliable and smooth conversion to digital distribution and exhibition across the world. Turning now to mastering for HDR television displays, a HDR UHD master version graded on a calibrated HDR Dolby Vision monitor, which can have a peak brightness of up to 1,000 candela per square meter, to the new BT 2100 standard, just released in 2016, is produced, and deliverables can be made for the Dolby Vision PQ display reference system. A number of television manufacturers will have the Dolby Vision capability in their newest TV sets, while current commercial HDR models use the open source HDR10 format, which again is based on PQ, and this is also used by internet streaming services such as Amazon, Netflix, and YouTube for their current HDR delivered content. The BBC's HDR version, which is known as HLG, or Hybrid Log Gamma, is developed jointly and produced with NHK in Japan. And this is orientated towards the transmission chain, allowing the transmission chain to deliver both high dynamic range and standard content. And streaming of HDR content will first be done using the BBC's iPlayer. All of which says that there'll be more bespoke deliverables coming up in the future. Thank you.
So it's all been a bit dry so far, lots of words on slides. Our next speaker is going to show you a few images, which is quite appropriate, I think, for a BSC Expo. And we're really pleased to have Mike here from Odeon. He's head of technical operations, group head of technical operations. You know that Odeon is the largest exhibitor in the UK. It's the largest exhibitor in Europe, and it just expanded. He's got a pretty big job, and I think it's a real privilege to have him to tell us about how he's trying to maintain the vision, retain the vision in theatres. You've got to change screens now, haven't you?
Take this one out and change onto the other computer now.
There we go.
Just make sure it works.
Okay.
Some ambient light coming in there. I don't know.
We had it earlier.
Boom. Thanks, guys. Well done. Okay, thank you very much. Very honoured to be here today, so really appreciate it. Can you all hear me? Digital cinema happened, 8 years ago-ish? 6, 7, 8 years ago? 10? Well, it happened to me in 2009 when we introduced, mainly through 3D, we had a small horror film called My Bloody Valentine come out, and it was a modest horror film that everybody just flocked to see it in 3D and gave the cinema industry a big wake-up call as to what 3D could do for revenues. So then there was this huge surge to push through to get much more 3D in, which was the catalyst really for the digital transition. So we had Monsters vs. Aliens after that, and then we were all preparing for Avatar, because we thought, well, if this small horror film can do good, then Avatar should obviously be revolutionary. We should make a fortune off this one. So 3D was rushed out, and it was really like a train coming down the tracks, putting 3D in a lot of screens that really probably shouldn't have had 3D put in the first place, because, as you know, all auditoriums are very designed specifically for whether it's 2D, whether it's size of the room, size of the screen, size of the projector, what kind of light you can get on screen. So ultimately, you know, what we ultimately try and achieve is this, which is being a little bit washed out, which is somewhat ironic, that we try to achieve in the perfect world. Can you see it?
No, it's just louder.
Now, this looks like it's relatively easy to achieve, and it's not. There's actually a heck of a lot of expertise that goes into achieving this, and lots of time and effort to make sure that we're trying to replay and project exactly what the filmmakers intended. And that's my, that's why I got into this business in the first place, is because I wanted to have much more of a say to make sure the work that the filmmakers are doing is achieving, arriving on screen properly. What we sometimes get is this, and this was the kind of experience, this is somewhat exaggerated to make a point, but this is the kind of thing that can happen if not enough care and due attention is put into the auditorium, not just the projection system, because unfortunately, in the digital world, when it happens, it also, what it brought with it was this understanding that digital is easy and it takes care of itself. And it just doesn't. There's also a lot of talk from people, rightly and understandably trying to sell digital projection, that it's automated a lot. Well, I can see you all now. It's automated a lot, and you don't need as many people to look after it, and it's all going to take care of itself, and everything's wonderful. When you first put it in, that's probably true, maybe the odd software update, but after time, you get people that are coming into the business that don't know really cinema, and because we've not got as many people coming from a sound and projection background anymore, it's probably coming more from an IT background, which, with all due respect to people in IT, and I'm in IT myself, that it's more infrastructure, not necessarily the end result of what comes out of the lens and onto the screen. So it's a lot more complicated than just putting a screen up and sticking a projector up, and hey presto, you've got a cinema. So in worst cases, you can get something like this, which this is when you've got a static flat screen on a silver screen, and you can see the unused pixels on the sides. You've got a awful fire exit sign shining on the silver screen, because silver screens are highly reflective. It's almost like a mirror, and they will pick up every scrap of light that's in the auditorium and amplify it. Then you might have lights in the ceiling that are not fully coming down as much as they should be, which we'll get onto in a minute. But this is pretty much the worst case scenario. So this, to me, doesn't say we value what we're putting on screen. Now, fire exit lights, this is a typical, bird's eye view of an auditorium, and when we're building auditoriums, which we get much more involved with now to make sure none of these horror stories happen. we have to have fire exit lights because we're in a public domain. People have to know where to leave, obviously. And when the lights are down, unfortunately, because again, we're a public place, I didn't mean unfortunately, but we are a public place, we have to get people out in case of an emergency. So there are areas in the auditorium that we have to make sure are illuminated even when we're at very low light levels. And they're usually, well, they are always the walkways, so particularly if you have stadium seating. So, we need to reach a minimum of 0.2 lux at the ground level when we're doing this. Efficiencies in cinema construction, mean that we would much prefer, and sometimes it's just historical, but some of the construction guys would much prefer, certainly the facilities guys who are having to deal with lights failing, much prefer the lights being in the ceiling, above the walkways, and hunky-dory. For a long time, even in the 35mm world, because this isn't particularly a digital problem, a long time, even in the 35mm world, this is exactly what happened. Maintain lighting, staying on in the event of people needing to leave the auditorium. When there's an emergency, all the lights come on anyway, and everyone can leave. But what's happened is LED lighting. LED lighting has been used, or it's been replaced for LED lighting because of cinemas needing to be green, being more efficient, cost saving, it lasts a lot longer. We also, a lot of the projectionists that we used to have were the guys who would change the lamps in the ceiling. Now we don't have projectionists anymore, pretty much, and therefore the whole lamp replacement thing has become a bit of an issue. So the longer these lamps work, the better. There's not much of a maintenance issue. And again, cinema is all about controlling costs that we can control. We love it when a film like Avatar comes out, but if a film comes out like Avatar and it doesn't do the business of Avatar, then that's a prediction we've made. And if we've not made that money, then we need to find money from somewhere else in order to make sure that top line is as closely hit as possible, rightly or wrongly. So what ends up happening is LED lighting, it doesn't fade. Obviously auditorium lights fade, well the good ones do, fade all the way down, and we normally leave them around 3%. But a lot of the LED lighting, and there are much better ones now, but when the cinemas were replacing them, they were replacing for LED lighting that would only go down to about 10%, because after 10% they just go off. And we can't afford for them to go off. They have to be on. So what we're having to do is leave them on higher than we would normally, which can sometimes make it even brighter, which is obviously giving us the issues with contrast levels, particularly when you add into the fold silver screens. So everyone's losing here. So what we need to do is I've been trying to raise the profile, not just in my own company, but other companies as well through the Nic group, of trying to achieve 0.2 lux by low-level lighting. Now this sounds like, well, obviously, Mike, but low-level lighting brings its own problems, particularly from a maintenance standpoint. Because if you've got, as it shows on here at the top, the red lighting on the stairs get kicked and bashed and walloped and all sorts, and they become really problematic. And because of the way how they're all installed, if one of them goes, then they usually all go, or you get a big section going out all at once. And the facilities people, it becomes the bane of their lives because they're very, very difficult to change, they're very expensive to change, and they hate it. And they're like, can we not just stick them up in the ceiling again so that nobody can kick them and break them? So we've also been looking at, there are better ones which we're still looking into, but we're also looking at the ones on the bottom, the blue section, where they're actually on the side. There's no really examples. It's pretty much like this, but on the side at the bottom of the acoustic walls. And we're looking into those as well, because there's been a massive, with Nic's help as well, and raising the bar, raising the awareness of it, we really do need to bring it back to how it should be, which is low-level lighting, but safe for people to see around. The other problem with the fire exits is also something that we're looking at, because again, fire exits, people, we don't have projectionists, who were the ones that were really the police of the lamps that go inside the fire exit machine, so fire exit lights. So maintenance men will come in. They're not particularly presentation savvy. They'll come in and they'll go, oh, that lamp's failed, and they come in and they put another lamp in, and then it's too bright, and before you know it, you've got this. So it's a problem. And again, it's more of a problem because we've got silver screens, which pick up every scrap of light. So even the ones at the back of the room are still a problem. But what we found is that you can actually turn those lights off in the event, when the film's on, so we're starting to do that. We're starting to put them on the same circuit as all the other lights that fade, so that the fire exit lights will fade off, and they will come on in the event of an emergency. So again, this is the kind of lighting that we're looking at. But the problem with Nic's experiences, and a lot of other people's experiences, is with the hotspot. And the hotspot is a byproduct, really. There's always been hotspots, even in the 35mm world. It's just that they become much, much more common with the advent of 3D. Because of the boom of 3D, there was a surge of silver screens going in, a 2.4 gain silver screen, which wouldn't normally be a problem, but this is a white screen on a flat. The line at the top is for a flat frame. Yeah, so it's a little bit like what you're looking at now. Everything's uniform, everything's wonderful, happy days. What happens is when you put a silver screen on that same flat surface, on that same flat frame, you get a hotspot. But if you was to curve the screen, then that hotspot dissipates quite considerably. The more you curve it, the more it dissipates. But not a lot of cinemas did that. And one of the main reasons for that is because lots of film booking people wanted to have the flexibility of being able to play 2D in here, 3D in there, and then swap them around, because it's all about seating and capacities and things like that. And they don't want to be told, well, I want to put 3D in here. Well, I can't because it's not 3D. Okay, so make it 3D. So we make it 3D. And then before you know it, we've got 3D everywhere. So this is effectively the kind of diagram I was explaining to some of my guys, of a white screen. When you project it, it basically, all the light comes back into the auditorium, and that's why you get the much greater uniformity, and everybody's happy. And you get 14-foot lamberts in the middle, you probably get about 12-foot lamberts on the sides, and everything's happy days. What happens with a silver screen is that the flake on the screen, and the way how it works, is that all the light starts to refract off, and it starts to come off to the sides. And because it's effectively a mirror, as you know, when you shine a torch into a mirror, you get a big hot spot in the middle, and all the rest is dark. And it's exactly the same with the silver screen, if you don't curve it. But if you curve it, then that light that was going out starts to come back into the auditorium, and then you get much, much better uniformity. And again, it's because we've installed a lot of silver screens on non-curved screens. We can replace the sheet. That's relatively inexpensive. It's free in a lot of cases, because a lot of the 3D manufacturers will have a deal where they will provide the screen. But they're not going to replace the frame, and it's the frame that's the issue. So what you get then is you've got these high gain flat screens. So in order to compensate for the dark edges, you turn it up. And what you get then is it's really bright in the middle and really dark on the edges even more. So, you know, the instance that Nic had meant that the center of the screen was much brighter than it should have been, because they're probably trying to compensate, because there became an element in the industry of trying to get a screen average, rather than center was 14-foot lamberts and then a reasonable drop-off on the sides. There's always going to be a reasonable drop-off on the sides, hopefully. But if you're trying to compensate, then the center has to be brighter, and you end up with this. So this is a silver screen 1.4 gain, so you get this hotspot. The ones on the sides are the side view, the half viewing angle. So as you can see, if you're looking at the right side, then the hotspot follows you. And you go darker on the other side of the screen. Now, screen technology, early screen technology, wasn't that great, Since then, it's all been recognised, and the screen manufacturers have started to bring in much better screen technology. So we've got the 1.7 gain silver screens that some manufacturers do, and they're better. They're much better. They still give you a hotspot if you put it on a flat surface, but they're not quite as bad. Put them on a curved surface and look great, and they make 2D look really good as well. A silver precision white 1.4, again, that's even better because it's a lesser gain, and it's a different kind of technology on the screen with the flakes, and you get a much better uniformity. But obviously at 2D white only, you will get uniformity across pretty much no matter where you sat. So in summary, there's no standard for maximum light levels in the auditorium. There's minimum for health and safety requirements, but there's no maximum. There's no one going around saying this is too bright. Yeah, it's all down to the individual cinema exhibitor to set. And we need to raise that awareness, because there's some people out there that have not come from a sound and projection background. They've come at it from a different background, and they don't necessarily realise they're doing it wrong. LED lighting problem. Again, no regulations, guides, recommendations. Remove ceiling lights once the film is on, so we'll probably still have ceiling lights, but we can get rid of them and have low-level lighting. Because the other thing about ceiling lighting that people like and people have to understand is when architects are building cinemas, they're very proud of them. They have egos, the same as everybody, and they want their cinemas to look fabulous even with the lights on. So when you're saying everything needs to be black, they're going, ooh, that's a bit boring. I want it to look really nice, but it just needs to be black. Simple as. So turn the fire exits off. Knowledge gaps in MENA cinema upper management on the importance of presentations. We're really trying to up the education in our industry, in our organisation. Much more awareness required. Hotspots are a result of 3D boom. We are looking, whenever we install 3D now in a new cinema, if we can't curve the screen, it will not be 3D. It's as simple as. We have that authority now. We're just not doing it. We've learned it's stupid to do it because we'd rather have no 3D than poor 3D. So why would we do that? Screens are getting better, but they are more expensive. So there is still a battle to get, particularly when you're opening a 10, 15 screen cinema, to get that extra cash, particularly with precision white when they're twice the price of a normal screen. It's something that we have to factor in. So thank you very much.
So retaining the vision covers a lot of ground, really, doesn't it? Lots of ways to mess it up. We, as promised, we've got about 25 minutes for your questions. It'd be really nice if we could have the house lights up. There we go. And we've got some roving microphones.
Hi, my name's Stuart. 5 I'm a colourist. I've worked with Mike before, and my point is to the other Mike. I've given up going to the cinema now because the standards are appalling. Everybody's wasting their time with the kind of quality of digital projection at the moment. My main issue was the last 3 films I've seen in what you call, let's just say, punter vision, multiplex cinemas. Every single time on a 2D presentation, they had the 3D filter in the projector. And every time I raised it, it was because there was nobody there to take it out of the way. So basically you're...
It's good asking Mike that, because he doesn't have that system, do you, Mike?
Well,
yes
there were other issues as well. It was on a silver screen, there was hot spots, it was softer once, half of it was out of focus. On one thing there was a sheen on it because it had a problem with the fabric.
Okay, let's keep this tight. So
The main point is this whole 3D thing really just needs to die because it's compromising, most films.
Can I come in briefly?
yeah, Ian, go for it.
It's actually picking up an answer to your question. I think that the experience of the cinema would improve enormously if the things that Mike is talking about and the conditions of projection making sure that light is low, that the hotspots off the screen would dramatically improve people's experience of cinema. And I think that one of the things that needs to happen is to consider ways in which maybe projectionists or somebody that has a multiple role can become involved. I was at an event that was curated by Christopher Nolan, who's a big supporter of film. He managed to convince all the stakeholders in the British film industry were there, exhibitors, BFI, Film 4, and the National Film School. And the Picture House Cinemas said that if the National Film School would start up a projectionist course, they would co-fund it. And that's because they said that, like organic food, there is a growing demand from their audience members to see things projected. So the idea that, my worry for ever-increasing technological advancements is that what's going to happen is that the audience, like they were in the last 10 years, will be guinea pigs for all of the ironing out of the issues. I mean, DCP hasn't been a standard. I went to Motion Picture Solutions, who make all the DCPs. I looked at a film that I made 10 years ago that was re-released, luckily last year. It looked pretty good. And then it was shown in a very, very prominent mainstream cinema. And I asked the projectionist why it looked all brown. He said, we need to replace our projectors. I've been telling the management we needed to do that for years. So I think sorting out the experience of where we are now is much more important than looking at the next wave.
Thank you, Ian. I was the European Society of Exhibitor National Societies is called UNIC. UNIC, and Mike and I were there at their last meeting, and somebody said, well, we do need some kind of a certification system, a kite mark. I suppose some of us remember back the THX days when people were trying to do that. It's a very hard thing to do. I thought the one group that wouldn't go for that would be exhibitors, because that imposes some new costs to do that. But they were the ones who were really pitching for it, and certainly Mike. You can see, he's on a crusade to deal with these things, but you can't just fix everything overnight. And I thought it was really interesting that in two sessions I've had recently, one was at UNIC and one was at our EDCF conference. The view was we need to make sure that what we have today is working optimally is much more important than going to the newer technology. So thanks for the question.
Qualified. You need somebody who's more qualified now actually in the cinemas, because as you say, there's nobody there who can deal with any problems.
There is nobody there in the booth. They're selling ice creams and sweets. There's
we got
nobody
the point.
that cares in the cinema.
It's a good point. There's a question over there. I'm going to push on if I may.
So hi, my name's Kieran. I'm a director. Thank you. And and I think, just probably a different point to just say to Mike, I saw La La Land on one of the iSense screens and I thought it looked great. And probably just pick up what Ian said is in terms of there being, I think with digitalization, there has been, again, across the board of filmmaking, this dilution of craft and skill and training, and that it's probably, it's important to start actually all of those moments where it used to be, people would be projectionists for years and years and years and be able to, present films. And I think, it's important to bring that training back in and to try, again, bring back that importance of how the film should look on the screen and to bring that back. So the fact that there is initiatives trying to be brought in and that it's being brought up is good.
Yeah, great. I don't think that's a question. Let's move on. It's a great comment.
Hi, Danny Hollingsworth from Avid. So my question is really around choice kind of came up quite a lot, and I kind of to jump on the kind of thought about 3D needs to die, and I think that's a silly conversation to have, and I think actually moving technology forward is really important, and I think the kite badge idea is absolutely something we should be, as an industry, we should be looking at. But it's, like you said, what can we do today? And I think one of the things I find from going to cinemas, and it can be from the high-end kind of boutique-y cinemas to the multiplexes that we talk about, is actually just understanding what's in the cinema is often really hard. So I think one of the simplest things we could do even today is actually just to present what's actually inside a cinema. You can't. It's quite hard to go on. I'll use Odeon as an example. To go on an Odeon website and just go, okay, there's 5 cinemas. it's 5 screens, and my movie's on screen 1, and screen 1 has a screen of this size, and this audio setup, and this type of projector. I think education is really important, and I think there's 2 or 3 different types of cinema viewers, right? There's a lot of us in the room, and obviously we're going to look at things a lot more critically than, say, the average punter. But I think it's about education. Punters don't know what they should be expecting. I think we should be able to walk through a door and know what we're actually going to see inside a cinema. So I think that's maybe a statement and a bit of a question about what could we do, immediately, I suppose.
It's slightly off topic for this panel, but I do know that Odeon care about that, because I've heard Ian Shepherd saying we've got to make it easy for people to buy tickets and know what they're buying the tickets for.
Yeah, it is. It's you're absolutely right. It is all about education. I'm on as Dave said, a bit of a crusade with my company at the moment, trying to educate even senior management in this kind of things, so that people know and appreciate why we're doing things, and it's not just, as I say, a projector and a screen and boom, you've got a cinema. So I'm trying to recruit some trainers, I like to call them educators, because it's not necessarily what to do, it's why we're doing it. So that even like the contact centres where people might phone up and complain, or the tickets not work, or whatever it may be, educate them in cinema, bringing them the etiquette of cinema, understanding when someone says it was too dull. Well, okay, we'll have somebody look at that. It might be the lamp, it might be the polarizer. Getting them educated so that they understand and can have a conversation with someone that. Without trying to blag it and making themselves look even more stupid. So we are really trying to educate them into why it's important. I keep saying to them, there's a reason they give out Oscars for cinematography. Do you know what I mean? There's a detail that we have an obligation to make sure that we can project these films exactly the way they're supposed to be intended. And I know, we don't always achieve it. But we certainly in my company, I've got guys out there working almost to the, working the bone to the ground or whatever it is, trying to make sure things are on screen as good as they could possibly be. And it really hurts me when people say, "Oh, I've had this problem, I had that problem," and I'm like, "Well, I know, but tell me about it. Complain. Don't just accept it." I know we're, in Britain, we just kind of hang our head and go, "Oh God, it's never going to get good." But we really do need to make more of a noise about it, and because it's what will make it happen.
Mike, I'm going to cut you off.
Okay.
I want to get off just moaning about cinemas, because I think we're making a point, and Mike's got like 800 cinemas in the UK. Screens. 900. So it's a big job.
I was just had one more moan about the cinemas. So it's interesting, Mike was saying that he's having to teach his management about the screening room problems, but haven't Odeon been in this business of running cinemas for nearly 100 years?
Yeah, but not with the same management.
Yeah, but surely it all gets passed down, does it not?
No.
So that's a huge problem for...
It doesn't. That's the problem. New managers come in and say, "We're going to change all this." But one of the good things is the last crowd have given Mike a lot of support, and I think that's a credit to Odeon.
Well, yeah, exactly, because one of the problems I was going to say is a lot of my friends say, "Oh, I'm not going to go and see La La Land for 15, 18 pounds. I can't be bothered. It's too expensive."
Yeah.
So then I can see it's a catch-22, because then the cinemas aren't making money, so they haven't got people to pay, maintenance people to change bulbs and check bulbs even.
Right.
So I can see how it's a double-sided coin there.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's the point I was making with the new television, but it's a different experience, and I, for one, are one of the people that want to keep the cinema experience very special and superior. Another question, please.
Yes, hi. Sean Glasgow. I'm a newbie independent filmmaker. Very interesting presentation. I guess this sense of a world of competitors and setting standards, as opposed to maybe in the old days with regulated industries. I guess, how good is the cinema forum functioning in terms of those standards, or them being driven, I guess, more willy-nilly? And I tend to think things like an energy czar. Is there an idea that there needs to be digital cinema czar that really sets those standards so that we don't have this problem with all these different technologies that we need to deal with.
Well,
And then
we need to keep these questions short, if you don't mind. The answer to your question is the cinema standard stuff is running open loop. We have got to get engaged with it. The ASC are back in the game, working hard, and my solicitation to the BSC is that we need to participate in that. Nic's on board. This panel was about maintaining retaining the vision. And I think we've got to be careful that we don't sort of say, you know what, the way it should be, this should be like this. We've got to collectively get together and say, this is what we think counts. What do you guys think about what is the right high frame rate? What is the right range for HDR? A manufacturer, Universal, Disney, Warner, all exhibitors, Odeon, View, they're all going to have a different view on that, but what we have to do is bring people together so that we can design the right kind of kit that will satisfy our customers. And it needs participation, not moaning.
good luck with lots of organizations doing that.
Yeah, well, but how else, there is no one czar. No one's going to appoint a czar. Are they? What do the rest of you think?
Can I just say something?
Yeah, Nick.
Can you hear? I think you're right, Ian. I mean, this is, Dave, this is the beginning, restart of a journey. And I think there are lots of good ideas around, and we've got to get together more and find a cross-platform.
And a collective voice.
Collective that can look at this kind of thing, can look at HDR and what are the implications of projecting HDR at different brightnesses. Do we need to be specific about the level of bright? All that kind of stuff really needs to be now talked about, seen, looked at by ourselves, by our directors, by a collective of the kind of people we've got here today. So, thank you all for coming, by the way.
I think it's a great initiative for Nick to put this panel together, because and to get this spectrum of interest is pretty impressive. More questions?
Hi, thank you so much. Cinema is extremely special, but a lot of people these days are watching movies on their laptops or even on their mobile phones.
Right.
So my question is, if you could speak to some of the challenges and solutions to retaining the vision for this new age of watching movies.
What was the question?
Watching movies on your phone, watching movies on your laptop, how can some of these issues be brought to that realm as well as to the cinema realm?
I think that's all part of it, but Ian, what do you think about that?
Well, am I right in thinking that actually that cinemas screens are being built in ever bigger numbers, and that the numbers of people going to the cinema is increasing all the time? I was at a meeting of all of the CEOs of exhibitors, and they said that they weren't worried about the future of cinema, that cinema is very healthy. I was talking to the CEO of Curzon Cinemas, Philip Natchbull, and he said that there's a group of people that is always going to want to see something in the cinema, and so that's what's partly behind his idea of doing simultaneous releases on television and in the cinema. And the proof of that is the number of people that are going to see live transmissions of theatre. It's a huge explosion of activity that took everybody by surprise, to the extent that the mainstream cinemas are doing that. And the reason is there actually isn't enough, and I think this is partly the answer to your question. I think it's about what is produced to go into the cinema. And I think one of the imbalances that we have is that American distributors particularly have such buying power that they saturate the market with literally hundreds of millions of pounds worth of marketing, so that it's very difficult for the exhibitors to have alternative films or even mainstream non-studio films shown in their cinemas, because there isn't the marketing push, for every cinema that you put a film in, it costs a lot of money. So whether it's shown in 40 cinemas or 400 cinemas, that's a big difference in cost. And that's not just talking about the advertising. So I think that really I've got a two-part answer to that question, which is I think in certain ways cinema is very healthy, and it's healthier than it's ever been. A lot of people go to the cinema in this country, and the Picture House and Curzon are building new screens every quarter. I mean, it's a huge expansion program that they have. But I think a lot of people are saying, well, there's a huge audience which is older than 25, who don't feel that they're being served by the sort of material that they want to see in the cinema. They don't want to necessarily see Transformers 5 and 6. So the challenge is, how do we satisfy those, the audience members who want to go to the cinema, who love that experience, who think that spending, 12, 15 pounds is not that much for a good night out. How do we get them coming to the cinema? And the fact that live transmission of theatre has been such a success shows that there's that huge demand. So I think that is linked to the future of the exhibition business. It's trying to find some way, and my view, and I think other people have the view, is that there's a huge role for television here. That there's a potential for television-funded either single films or dramas to be shown in cinemas. And I know the exhibitors are very interested in this. And there have been isolated cases where they've had a simultaneous showing of Doctor Who in the cinemas and on television at the same time, because the broadcasters have a budget, they have the means of publicising, and it's actually the broadcasters who are dragging their feet on this, not the exhibitors. The exhibitors are desperate to cater for this audience, and the only thing that they can find really that is that has that level of recognisability of acting talent and star talent are the big theatre productions where you can see Benedict Cumberbatch or Tom Hiddleston or Maggie Smith or Judi Dench. To me, I think that people, there's always going to be a group of people that want to go out and have that collective experience. The music industry found this. When downloads were eroding profits, everybody said that's the end of the music industry. But what saved the music industry are gatherings of hundreds of thousands of people in festivals. And that's the cinema equivalent in kind of audiovisual storytelling. So I think that I think there's a big part that having more diversity of films available in our cinemas is the big challenge for me.
Great, thank you. Great contribution, Mike. Anything to add to that? I mean, is your work? No, I mean Mike Eley.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, Ian's right. I mean, I think it was the year before last was the biggest audiences at a cinema since 1946. And there's, I think that people do want that collective experience, and I think the education process that's been mentioned is something that will. I think that's the main experience is the going out to the pictures, and what happens there I think can be introduced incrementally but very decisively, and it will become the norm. And the idea of the kite mark being the sort of badge of excellence is something that people will suddenly notice. I think a bit like, sort of camera badges on pubs. Suddenly it's like, oh, well, here's a decent pint. This I didn't notice this before, and the word gets round, and I think that's that rolls out eventually amongst the populace. I think there's every reason to be optimistic, to be honest.
I
mean, it's a different experience watching something on a phone. It's it's a new way of people watching things that we didn't have before. But I see it more like someone might listen to music on their car stereo rather than go to a concert or listen to it on a big hi-fi, or it is you might choose to have that compromised experience because it's convenient for you, but you do recognise that you're not getting the same experience as if you went to the cinema or to the theatre, to a concert house, or it's just another choice of how to consume a film. I mean, you're not going to see much film grain on a phone, for example, if someone's...
Greg, while you got the mic, one of the things, if I could change the topic of questions, one of the things that has been a big push in the US Academy has been the development of the ACES, Academy Colour Encoding System. What's your view about how that helps us to deal with, a plethora of monitors, of deliverables requirements, and the questions to Paul as well? Do you see that as a useful tool, or does it in some way threaten the magic art of the post-production house, that he knows how to do those transforms and that's his secret sauce?
Well, there's a bit of a mix of those two things. I think it's very nice how a camera manufacturer will have to describe how to turn their raw format into ACES, and that's very helpful to be able to mix different cameras together in the one color space. However, to grade in ACES is not as pleasant an experience as to grade in log C, for example, or Cineon log.
Why?
Well, just the grading tools don't react in a familiar way as they do when you're grading log C or film log. I mean, you can still get to the end result, same end result, but it's a little bit more fiddly to get
not
there.
so productive.
So for me, I haven't used it very often. I've used it a few times. I don't really feel any great benefit from it myself, because we will always have a good way of converting from one type of camera's color space to another to match them that way. So I don't really feel that benefit that does the ACES does give you. And the thing I don't like about it is that the ACES RRT is a sort of prescriptive look, which you may or may not like. There is a discussion going on with the Academy about these LMTs, which is look modification transforms, which can be combined within the ACES space, and I think that's how it will pan out eventually. Because basically once it gets into the grading suite, it's not really to be dictated for every different type of film how that's going to look. Which the ACES does to some degree.
It's a big topic, isn't it?
You're still very flexible in how you can do the grade, but you're not as flexible as you are today, and so I don't see it so progressive.
Okay, we're running out of time, folks. We've got time for one more question. Lady in the red.
Yes, I'm going to try to frame it in a question. You talk about a SAR for the cinema. They're not going to listen to you because you're below the line. And I would propose, Roger Deakins, but Martin Scorsese, Inarritu. I said I would only ever go to the cinema, but I lie because the Academy sends you 50 films, and you watch them. But La La Land or any one of the films out this year, watching that on a big screen, you are totally moved. Watching it on a DVD is nothing. So we have to encourage people to go to the cinema, and that's where my second question comes in. Why does it cost £17 or £20 to go to the cinema? In France, it costs 10 or 8 euros. In other countries, it costs $5 or $8. Why can't we get the government to have like the Edie Levy law, whatever that was? It's before my time. Why don't we make cinemas cheaper and make it accessible to people? I'm never going to go for £18 for the cinema. I'm going to find it somewhere else in another country. So people from so about the SAW business, I think Martin Scorsese has said this at Cannes many times, and Roger Deakins is a power. You've got to get powerful people, Nolan and other directors to say along with DPs, we have spent 5 years making this film. We're not going to send it out and you make it look like shit. So I think you should form a committee and get big heavyweights, because they're not going to listen to companies or distributors. They don't count. Money counts.
Okay.
I think that's what Mike is trying to do. He's trying to engage with the BSC.
I'm chair of the Directors UK Film Committee, and whenever we have a campaign, members of our committee, Paul Greengrass, Kevin MacDonald, as well as myself and Amarasanti, and we're actually involved in a campaign at the moment, and what we do is we get as many of our heavy hitters to sign up. And we've got one campaign where we've got 40 people who've signed, everybody from Sam Mendes, Alan Parker, Lynn Ramsey, Ken Loach. So we get broad range diversity, age, experience. So, I mean, the answer to your question is we don't need to have Martin Scorsese to say this, because there are many, many people who are behind all of these ideas who live and work in the United Kingdom.
Look, unfortunately, folks, we're at the end of our time. I would, first of all, like you all to give a big round of applause to the panel. Secondly, I'd like to thank the technical crew for their support with the sound and the lights. But I'd like a specific round of applause for Nic, who's put this together for the BSC, and for the BSC for making all this available to us. I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable and varied. So thank you all extremely for your support.